Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I may just be going back and forth as I'm letting people in. And please let me know if this is a new headset I'm using, so it might be weird. So if you have any comments, you can just put them in the chat. So welcome everybody. My name is Brenna Ewing, and I'm responsible for our volunteer, foster, and education program at the Santa Cruz SPCA. And today we are talking foster. You guys are all here to learn a little bit about our program and how you can get started. So, this is super informal. You guys can throw out questions. You can stop me in the middle of what I'm saying and get my attention. I don't mind that at all. I'd much rather answer your questions as they come up. You can also use the chat if you're more comfortable doing that. Whatever kind of works best for you. I will, while I'm talking, at least ask for you guys to keep your microphones muted if you've got background noise. But then, if you need to ask a question or need some further info, you can go ahead and let me know that. My coworker Jennifer is joining us as well today. She might be responding to you in the chat. And we're recording our session today just to be able to go back and make changes as needed. So, again, thank you everyone for joining us. I am going to share my screen with you. Can you guys all see that? Whoops. Whoops. Hold on. That's not the one I wanted. Let me try that again. All right, here we go. Okay, can you guys all see that? You can give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, so first off, and some of you may know this, I'm looking directly at you, Erica, because you work on site with us at the shelter. What does Santa Cruz SPCA stand for? Does anybody know? It's my first question for you guys. This will be the only testing, I promise. If anybody thinks they know and want to unmute themselves and share. Erica, do you have a guess?
I'm just gonna throw that out. You said that before, and it's not what we people think, but it's something like special people care for animals.
No, but that's actually what a lot of people think, and most of the time they'll say that too. It's
Okay.
actually, but good try. It's actually the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to
Oh,
Animals, and I'm picking on Erica because she is an on-site volunteer and is joining the foster ranks today. So yeah, Society for the Prevention of
okay.
Cruelty to Animals, and we are like many other shelters across the country who call themselves SPCA and Humane Society, yet none of us are linked in any way. So when I say to give, I always tell folks to give locally. Probably some of you are familiar with the ASPCA ads that are on the TV. That is not us. Those folks don't give us any money. That's actually a shelter out of New York City. They just have a lot more money than we do. So again, just know that SPCAs and humane societies all have their own individual funding sources and policies and procedures, and we're not linked in any way. Okay, so just a little background for you guys. Let me go ahead and go to the next one. So the reason that you are all here to become fosters is super important to us because it really helps us carry out our mission. We only have a limited number of kennels at our shelter, and having foster homes actually allows us to take in more animals than we can physically house on site. So you all will allow us to basically up the amount of animals we can help at any given time. And people already have. Again, you're super, super important to our mission. And our foster needs definitely vary throughout the year. Right now, we're sort of at the end, heading towards the end of kitten season. It usually goes through summer into fall, sometimes even into the winter if it's warm enough. Continues to happen as it stays warm. So we still are seeing kittens. We, in fact, have several 8-week-old kittens at the shelter right now. And that's a constant foster need during like February through November. The rest of the time, what you'll often see are a smattering of reasons for foster. So it might be something like we need to give these animals a break from the shelter because they're too stressed. It could be that we've got puppies. Puppies have no special time frame. They come all year long. Or it could be that we've got adult cats that need a little socializing before they head out into somebody's home. So we'll go over what those are today. And then lastly, if you guys haven't visited us before, we are at 2601 Chanticleer Avenue, which is kind of catty corner to Gray Bears Recycling Center. If you guys have seen the overpass going up over the freeway, we're at one end of that on the mountainside of Chanticleer. And that's where you can find our shelter. So when you're coming to pick up a foster, if you're coming to meet some, if you're doing supply pickups, that's where you're going to go. We moved into that new building in the magical year 2020 during the pandemic, and we had a couple years of getting ourselves up and running in that facility again during the pandemic. So really, we're still constantly iterating on how we handle things. So anything that changes around foster and the program, I will keep you guys appraised of. Okay, so here is our mission statement. I don't expect you guys to know this or memorize it, but it's just to give you a sense of what we're working towards. And we are really a safe harbor for a lot of animals because we actually take animals a lot of times that would not have had a chance at adoption from the shelter they were coming from. So in a lot of ways, some of them, it's their last stop. And they get to stay with us until they find a home. So we're lucky enough to kind of say who comes to us and um, give them that second chance at life. And yes, through the pandemic, we were doing everything remotely. We continue to help when there's fire, flood, anything that comes up. In fact, we had a flood last year at the beginning of the year and had to evacuate the building. And we called on our foster homes, and you guys helped by taking 32 animals in one day. So it's pretty exciting. Okay, so where do our animals come from? If you're not super familiar with us, we get about 40% of our animals are surrendered by owner. So those are cats and dogs within our community that folks need to give up for whatever reason. And then we get about 60% from partner shelters all over California. And we take the most from Santa Cruz County Animal Shelter. They're the other shelter in our neck of the woods. And we are not the same shelter, but we work very closely together. And we always start by supporting them so that we can help animals again within our own community. And then if they don't need our help for any reason, then we'll go kind of outside to surrounding areas like Monterey, Hollister, Salinas, sometimes even as far down south as Kern County, which has a huge overpopulation problem. Folks often ask us if we are a no-kill shelter, and we do not like to use that terminology, no kill versus kill, because it's very divisive among shelters. And really, we're all in this together. And so we want to partner with any other shelter that we can to try and get more animals home. We're lucky enough to say we have a 99% placement rate. So it's pretty rare that we have to euthanize. But when we do, it's usually for quality of life. So the vet is saying that it's not okay for this animal to continue in this way, or a behavior issue that we've tried everything in our behavior toolbox and it's just not safe to put the animal back out there. But it's pretty rare that we actually have to make that decision. Okay, so this is just a little bit about how we're different from the Santa Cruz County Animal Shelter because people always get us confused. We are privately funded. We're a 501(c)(3), which means we are nonprofit. Everything we use within our shelter, down to the towels, the food, the blankets, are donated by the community. We're super lucky to have that kind of support. And as I mentioned before, we're often taking the animals that need that safe harbor because they are not able to go up for adoption at another shelter for whatever reason. Maybe it's resources, maybe they're too full, but we really try to be that kind of second chance for those animals. Okay, so our foster program today, as I mentioned, we are trying to put more animals into foster than ever before because that allows us to actually help more animals total. It doesn't just confine us to the numbers within our building. And we are kind of coming up with new processes and procedures. In fact, we're focused on the foster program this year as one of our goals. So we're going to be sending out a lot of changes, like foster questionnaires to help you give us information about the animals. We're going to have a go home sheet that'll give you nice links where you can send us photos and videos, things like that. And we're trying to make the process of meeting a foster and taking them home a lot more streamlined for everybody. So stay tuned for all those cool things. And then we really learn from you more about our animals. Every time an animal leaves our shelter, we're getting a ton more information about them that we probably didn't know before. So, as much as you can share about your experience with the fosters, the better, because that's really going to help us in finding them good placement because we've got all the most up-to-date info. We really want you to assist as much as possible. In fact, the expectation is you're going to be giving us content on a regular basis. So we want you to send us photos. We want you to send us videos. We're working on a way to make that a little bit easier for you so that it's not like just through email or text. Um, and we also want you to be involved with adoption if you're open to it. A lot of our fosters will talk to potential adopters on the phone. Some of them will even do shows at their own home to show off an animal. It's really up to you and what you're comfortable with, and we'll talk about that once you have a foster in your care. And then if you are tech savvy, we would love your help in marketing. If you're willing to share on your own social media channels, we use all the big ones, Instagram and Facebook. We use Nextdoor. We use YouTube. If you're willing to share those things and tag us, that's super helpful as well. And it's a good way to get us the content too. Okay, everybody with me so far? Any questions yet? All right. So a lot of times folks are thinking that they have an idea of what an animal is going to be like based on their own experiences. Of course, you've had animals probably in your past at one point or another. And so it makes sense to think, okay, well, I kind of have already an idea of what's going on here. And the thing about animals coming from a shelter is that they, a lot of times, are going to be a little bit different than the animals you've always had. Um, they're coming with some sometimes not wonderful beginnings. In fact, I can give you an example right now. We have several dogs that came from a hoarding situation, and they are very under socialized. They have lived with other dogs. In fact, there were 38 total dogs living together, but they had no human interaction. So we're actually looking to get a couple of them out into foster because they need work on that socialization. So again, a lot of our animals are coming with a non-idyllic past. And every time they make a change, even though, coming to us can help them and going to you can help them, it's still a change. And animals who've been through trauma, even if it's just the change trauma, can carry a lot of stuff with them. So just don't take it. What I always tell folks, my fosters, is don't take it personally. The animals might be super frightened at first. It may take them some time to get comfortable with you and comfortable with the new setting. And it just means you have to take a slower approach if they're doing some hiding and not ready to come out and meet everybody. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like and things you can expect. The other big thing is that a lot of them are going to be potentially escape oriented, especially if they are frightened. And don't worry, we are here to assist you if you lose a foster. In fact, we lost a foster last week, got out an open door, and myself and one of my coworkers took another dog that foster knew out to search for him and were able to get him back. So we're never going to leave you out in a lurch. We're going to help you try and get that animal home. So you can always reach out if you're experiencing issues. Let's talk a little bit about our foster opportunities. So, probably the favorite of everyone is the slumber party, and they are just what they sound like. They are overnights or 2 to 3 days if you're open to that. And they are typically just with dogs. As you can imagine, with cats who don't necessarily do as well with change, it can be really stressful for them. So it's mostly dogs. And what we typically will do is have you meet us at the shelter at an approved time, and we'll introduce you to any of our slumber party candidates, and then kind of talk with you about what your home setup is like and what the animal's like, and we try to kind of match make and figure out which might be a good opportunity for you. So that is always available. If you're on our foster roster and I'm sending out fosters and you're like, none of these are really fitting into what I want, you can always say, hey, can I come and try out a slumber party? It's like a nice way to kind of dip your toe in the water, but not jump in the pool. It's a good way to get started, if you will. And then we also do recovery fosters from surgery, from illnesses. We do emergency foster, as I mentioned before, like we did in that flood, and you had to get animals out real quick. Sometimes that comes up. One of the main ones that we send out is behavior quality of life. If we have animals in our care that we notice are super stressed out and we're not getting to know them as much as we need to, we'll try to get them out into foster because a foster or a shelter environment, although we take excellent care of them and we try our best, is not going to be like a home environment. So sometimes that's all they need to really come out of their shell and tell us a little bit more about who they are. And then kitten, puppy, pregnancy fosters. Yep, those are happening all the time. And then we also do hospice. That's really can be a tough one for people because it requires you to be okay with taking an animal in its end of life care. Um, and if you do decide you want to do that, just know that we're going to follow you all the way through and keep in contact with our veterinarians so that quality of life is always at the forefront and the animal isn't suffering in any way. Okay. Any questions yet? All right, you guys are still with me. All right, here we go. So, some things to consider before fostering. We're not going to check if it's okay for you to have fosters, so make sure you talk to your landlord if you need to, or talk to everyone in the home. If you have roommates, make sure they don't have allergies or fears around animals, or make sure they're comfortable bringing them home. Talk to the people in your family, make sure everybody's comfortable there, and really think about what kind of space you have available for the animals you want to take. That will often tell you what size you can accommodate. Sometimes that's your home itself, or it could be what's outside your home and available to the animal. If you're taking a dog, if you're taking a cat, they're going to be with you and indoor the whole time. So they pretty much work in any environment as long as you can prevent them from going out a window. And then we also want you to make sure you have adequate time. So the time, of course, you're going to give time to your foster every day just to make sure that they're getting their needs met. But that time can also involve doing pickups for supplies because we're going to provide you with everything you need. It could be meet and greets for adoption. It could even be coming to us for a veterinary visit if there's something going on. So make sure you're factoring all that in when you agree to take one on. If you do have vacations or things planned in the near future, just let us know. We're not going to say no to foster. We just need to know the time frame. Oftentimes, what we'll do is we'll send a foster out with someone for a couple of weeks, and then during that time, when they're needing to bring back, we'll look for a second foster if needed. So it won't prevent you from necessarily taking a foster animal. And then make sure you're ready to handle the emotional aspect of the end of foster. Once you've dropped off your foster animal, and maybe even if you've talked to the adopter, that's kind of where we expect it to end. We don't want necessarily there to be contact after the fact, so you've got to be comfortable with the idea that we're going to place the animal and we're going to follow through. Um, and that can be really hard. I mean, I've had fosters myself, so I know I've gone through it. And the cool thing is that you are probably going to get to hear from myself and our staff what's going on with that animal. In fact, we send out a Friday update every week that includes fosters, and we put our adoption success stories in there every week. So you'll be able to kind of see what's happening. Okay, on to the next one. Oops. Hold on just a sec, you guys. So what will you need? You guys really won't need any accoutrements. We're going to give you everything, everything that's listed here. So essentially, all you're providing is the space and the time. Those are the two big pieces that you're giving to your foster animals. We're going to give you everything else. And that includes, like, if you're taking a dog or even if you're taking a cat, that's going to include enclosures that will keep them safe within your home and that will help prevent against escape. So we've got it pretty much all that we can give to you. Um, so you don't have to provide that stuff. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this one, but if you've had an animal or children, you know that you have to animal proof your home. And the big thing I want to point out here that I don't think a lot of people recognize until they've taken a foster is foster animals are going to find that tiniest nook and cranny they can squeeze themselves into if they're nervous. I've had cats get themselves into someone's couch through a hole in the bottom. I've had cats get behind someone's refrigerator. And so you just want to make sure that you find out where your hiding spots are within the area where the animal's going to be. And usually we recommend, at least with cats and sometimes with smaller dogs, that they're in one space, at least initially, so they can kind of get used to you and the sense of the home and where their food and water bowl is before you give them full run of the house. So make sure that you're blocking off any nooks and crannies. And if you're taking a dog, you got to make sure you're checking your fence too and that there's no holes that they can get through. All right. When you get your foster animal, we kind of call this initial period the 2 week shutdown period. It's not 2 weeks. It's different for every animal, but this is just a generalization that there is going to be a period of time where they're kind of getting used to the environment, and that's going to be based on their history, based on their fear level, all the things. So there are things you can do during that early time to make it more successful and less stressful on the animal. Even if you think it's okay, we need to look at the animal and try and decide what they're feeling because sometimes it may not be okay for them. So we want to limit our human introductions, make sure it's just the people in your home. You don't have a lot of strangers coming in and trying to interact with the animal, at least initially. You want to avoid really long walks away from your home. Animals are super good at finding their way back to you. And in fact, most of the fosters that have gotten away from people have stayed within a very small area close to the home. So you don't want to go too far outside that range because the farther out you go, the less they're going to recognize and be able to key into to get back to you if needed. So stay close, stay in your neighborhood, get them used to that setup. No like super heavy dog and people places, at least initially, until you know they're okay with that. So if you take this dog out to a dog beach and the dog is tucked with their tail and hiding behind you and running from every person and animal, then obviously they're not ready for that kind of excitement. And most of our animals, as they're getting to know you, are going to be in that general realm somewhat. So at least initially, no long car rides, beaches, dog parks, pet stores, all that kind of stuff. When you are not home, we do ask that you keep them enclosed. So if you've got a cat, we usually recommend you put them in one space, so a large bedroom or even a large bathroom would work. For a dog, we usually try to send you with a crate. And you can crate the dog for up to 3 or 4 hours if you have to go out for something and you don't want to leave them loose. And then when you're out in the yard with dogs, you want to make sure, at least initially, that you're keeping them leashed. And it can be a loose leash. We even have long lines so that you can allow them to be, far away from you and checking everything out. But this will allow you to kind of gauge how they're um, testing the fencing because if they are an animal who's a flight risk, they will test. They will walk up and down the fence. They will jump up looking for ways that they can get up and over. So if you have any concerns about your fencing, you're going to want to keep them on leash, at least initially. And then once you're feeling a bit more comfortable, what you want to do is actually keep the leash on, just drop it. So then you can see them react without them being tethered to you. And of course, if they're not jumping over, then lots of good praise and treats just to know they're doing the right thing. And then make sure you're keeping all your handling very basic and positive. So don't try to give anybody a bath. Don't try to clip nails. Don't do any of those grooming things. Make sure that it's always at the comfort level of the animal. They really need to determine the interaction, and we have to be okay with letting them do that. And then one thing that we recommend with both cats and dogs, when you go, if you're leaving for the day, a lot of times what happens to them is they're constantly keying in to every little noise they hear outside. So if you can put something on in the background to kind of drown that out, so that could be white noise, that could be the TV, the radio, it does help somewhat with that, so that they're not like jumping and barking or going crazy at every sound they hear. All right. I'm now going to go into some of the specifics around animal intros and what to do with cats versus dogs. Um, and you guys are still doing okay? Anybody got any questions so far?
I have a
Okay.
question.
Oh, yeah. Shoot.
My question was just about the overnights,
Yeah.
or like having a dog or for 2, 3 days.
Yes.
Um, I was wondering if you could just speak to the benefit of that. I mean, I think that's the one I'm interested in doing, but I'm also
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that's a lot of change for them, or like to
Sure.
go and then go back to the shelter and maybe like I don't know, just it would be helpful to hear about what's helpful about that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you asked that question. They have actually studied this, and it has shown more of a benefit than a detriment to the animals, even if it's 24 hours. And the reason is it gives them a break from the shelter environment, which is so incredibly stressful. Um, and with that, though, we're always going to be sending you with animals that are going to be a little bit more amenable to going on an overnight. So they're not going to have huge like behavior issues. They're not going to be super frightened, like so much so that they're not coming out of their shell, unless we've talked about that and you're comfortable with it, right? But the slumber party animals are typically animals at our shelter that we would categorize as green. And what that means is they are comfortable with people, they're comfortable with other animals, they haven't shown us any real strong behavior issues that you need to be worried about. So, the other great thing about the 24-hour slumber party is, again, it gives them a break from the shelter. But like I mentioned, it also tells us how they do in a home, which is so huge in our matchmaking process for adopters. So, we're lucky when we get that info. Does that kind of explain
Yeah,
what it
that's great.
does?
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Yeah, and I can always send you the studies that they've done if you're more interested in that. But
Yeah.
yes.
Brenna, I just have a question about
Yeah.
when we're transporting, say, because I would be dog,
Yes.
taking them home,
Yes.
do they need to be transported in a crate or can they like be in the back seat somehow?
So we usually recommend that they're either in a crate, or we also have seatbelt attachments that attach to a harness. So we recommend either one of those. And it really is the comfort level of the person. The only time I think that we've run into a problem is when we've had a really, really big dog, like 125 pounds, and we didn't have a crate big enough to put them in.
Right.
But that comes up very infrequently. One way or another, we'll either have the seatbelt harness or the crate, and we would prefer that they be secured while you're heading home.
Okay,
That makes
thanks.
sense? Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about introduction to the other animals. Probably many of you, like our existing fosters, have animals at home, which is totally fine. Um, what we typically do, and there's more of, I think, of an issue around dog to dog meetings before you take your foster, in that we want to try and do an intro with them at the shelter space, not in our yards, not in the shelter, but what we do is we take them on a parallel walk down the street. And that's a way of us kind of seeing if there's any red flags that are going to jump out for either the foster dog or your own dog. And then from there, if they seem like they're getting along okay, being in close proximity, we might move to a yard. And then if they're still okay in the yard together, we might drop the leashes and then let them interact. But it always starts with a neutral area that we can just walk them up and down and kind of see how they do. When you are doing that, it's one important thing to keep in mind is that dogs are going to react as much as you react. So if you're putting a lot of stress on the other end of that leash, they're feeling like, uh-oh, there's a problem. I need to react. I need to do something about this. So it's important that we try and keep our leashes as loose as possible so that they don't become reactive with one another. And that is super hard. I have learned it in training class and it's still really hard for me. So, just keep it in mind. We'll try and make sure that we're keeping as loose a leash as possible. And once we do the intro, if it looks like it's going to work out, what we would recommend is that before you even take them home and go into your home, you do another short walk in your neighborhood just to see if there's any issues that crop up there. And if no issues, you can then move into the home.
And
But
do you do the those intro walks even for the 24-hour slumber parties? Or is
yes,
that just
yes, yeah. Because we want to make sure that we're not putting you in a situation that, you know, is you're gonna be like, what what do I do about this? And it still isn't gonna tell us everything, right? There could still be a chance you get them home and they still aren't super comfortable with each other, or maybe there's an issue over a treat or a toy. But we're gonna try and give you as much info as we can going in so that it can be as calm and easy as possible. Um, the other thing to remember, and this is important on your side too, you know your dog. So we're going to want you to watch the body language of your animal and really gauge how they're feeling. There have been times where I've told fosters, I don't think this is the best match, or, your dog seems a little bit like stressed out by this dog, even when they wanted so badly for it to work. Again, it's all about making sure that it's the right situation for the animal, and that's not just our animal, that's your animal too, is we want it to be as stress-free as possible. Um, Once you get them home, one thing we recommend is that you're not leaving them alone together until you absolutely know it's okay. So that's going to take some time. You're going to have to be really managing how they're doing in the space together and watching for any of those red flags. Is your dog, getting jealous of the time you're giving to the foster? Or is your dog guarding their food bowl or their bed and they've never done that before? Like we really need you to be watching for those things and talking with us about them. And then we can kind of help you work through that. Whoa, sorry guys, if you heard that. Um, Oop, I went too fast. I gotta go back. Okay, so any other questions about dog intros before I move on to cat? Okay. So with cats, it's a little bit trickier in that, cats obviously, if you allow the cat to be in front of your dog, and you know that your dog tends to get excited over small animals, that can set up a pretty scary thing for the kitty right from the get-go. So what we usually recommend is that you do some scent sharing first. So as I mentioned before, with cats, we're typically asking you to keep them in one space. So that might be a bedroom or, again, a large bathroom. And you can scent share the different things between the cat and the dog. So take one of the dog's toys and put it in the area of the cat. Take the cat's blanket and put it in the area of the dog and kind of see how that goes. And then if you're not seeing any like um problems around that, then you can start maybe feeding them a little something on either side of a closed door. Then they can hear and smell each other, but they can't get to one another. So it can give you an idea if it's going to be an issue. And then once you actually allow them to spend time in the same area, what I usually recommend is either you keep your dog on leash just so you can pull back if needed, or you create something in the way of the dog. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll have a baby gate like on their kitchen with the dog in the kitchen. That way you can kind of stop them in their tracks so that they can't just chase after the cat. Because, a lot of times once that's happened, then it's just a no-go from there. And if any of these things come up, you can always call us. We'll try and walk you through it, but we also want this to be a good experience for you. So, if you need to bring the animal back and it's not a fit, that's okay. We don't want you to try and push your animals or yourself through something that's not a good fit or comfortable for everybody. All right, let's talk about escapes. So, as I mentioned, a lot of times we're, at least in the initial weeks, dealing with an animal who might be frightened, might be unsure, and is getting to know everybody and kind of how everything works with you. So, below are some, or here are some pictures of airlocks that we can create. We have X pens that we loan out to our fosters. And if you have a heavily traveled front door or back door, it's probably a good idea to get one of these. So if you've got like kids going in and out, or you have a lot of work that's happening at your house, you might want to create an airlock so that you can prevent the animal from just running through that open door. We also, if we know an animal's a flight risk and we've talked with you about that and you've agreed to take them anyways, we will also put air tags on some of our more flight risk dogs, just so we can get a sense of where they are and where to look for them. In the most recent lost animal, that's what helped us find that dog ultimately was an air tag. So we have a couple of options. We do always want you to be connecting your leash to the harness, never to the collar. The collar is meant only to be for ID purposes for an ID tag. It should always be connected to a harness, and we need to make sure that that's a harness that fits. So if you are taking an animal and you're noticing like this harness doesn't look like it fits well, just say, "Hey guys, I think I might need a different harness," and we can fit it right there. Um, no unsupervised outside time for dogs, at least at the beginning, without that leash, just so you can kind of gauge, are they looking for a way out from your fenced yard? And then with cats, obviously, no outside time. It's a lot harder to get a cat once they're gone than it is a dog. And I've lost both. So I can tell you it's tough to get a cat back. Um, Make sure they're always wearing their collar and ID tag. Always, always. Even if you want to give them a break from their collar and tag, don't do it. Always keep it on, because the one time they get away from you and they don't have that on, it just makes things that much harder. So make sure they're always wearing that, and then check your fencing, especially if you're getting a dog. You want to make sure that there isn't a way for them to get through. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit of talk about adult and young cats, and then I'm going to give you like basic care info, and then the next slide will be some information about kind of the behaviors we've seen with our foster cats, and I'll do the same thing for dogs. So for juvenile and adult cats, we are feeding them both dry and wet food, and our expectation is that you're going to continue to do both. They need the wet in order to get the moisture. Cats are not great about drinking water like they should, so they really need to have both of those things. Um, One way to gauge how your cat is doing is by monitoring their food and water intake. Cats are really good at hiding illness and even behavior issues. So if they are stopping eating in some way, there's oftentimes something going on. So please let us know if you're noticing like this cat is not eating anymore or this cat is getting super picky. We can try different things, and it may be that we just need to get them into the vet and have them checked out. So definitely monitor their food and water intake as well as their box. That also will give you information on how they're doing, like what their poop looks like and how often they're going to the bathroom. Uh, One thing I'm going to remind you of, and you guys probably already know this, but milk should never be given to cats. I don't know why they continue to do that in the media, but it actually is not something they can process. So please only water for them. They should be fed away from their litter box. If you have them in a small space like a bedroom or a bathroom, make sure the litter box and the food are like 6 feet apart. Because if they're too close in proximity, it could mean that they're not eating or they're not using their box, neither of which you want to deal with. Make sure you're scooping that box several times a day. Cats can be very particular about how clean their box is. And if you can keep them again in one space for like the first week to 2 weeks, they tend to do better with the overall change. During that time, you can go in and spend as much time with them as you can, just making sure that they can't hide from you the entire time. So, for example, if they're staying in your bedroom, what I usually will ask people to do is like bundle up a bunch of blankets or big towels and stuff them under your bed. Because if a cat's going to feel nervous and hide, it's going to go for under your bed, and then you're not going to get to interact with them at all. So try and block off the hiding spaces in the one space they're going to be in. And it's okay to leave a hide a bed or the crate. They can go into that, but that is a little bit easier access than, say, underneath your bed all the way in the back. And then we're going to give you toys. We're going to give you a scratching pad or a scratching post. We'll make sure that you go home with all the stuff you should need for their enrichment. And then please never let them outside. And if they are kind of casing the windows, another good thing to remember is that when it's hot outside, they will push open a screen. So make sure you have something to prevent that from happening. Okay, so here are some of the things that we hear about the most from our foster folks in regards to cats. So, destructive scratching and play, very common. Cats have to scratch. That's a normal behavior for them. Not only are they sharpening the claws, but they're also scent marking and stretching at the same time. So we want to make sure they've always got a scratching post or pad. And if they're going for something that you don't like, make sure you put whatever we give you in that area and sprinkle a little catnip on it to get them interested. And if they're still not going for it, there are a couple things you can use as deterrents. One kind of good one is you could put a little double stick tape on there. A lot of times they don't like the feel of that. You can buy something at the pet store called bitter apple. Bitter apple is just a really nasty taste. You put it on with their scratching, and then when they lick, they taste it, and it tastes nasty. Doesn't hurt them at all, but it's oftentimes a good deterrent. And then, as far as destructive play, because this isn't really, I wouldn't say this is destructive. I would say it's overexcited play. You don't want them playing with things that are inappropriate. So don't give them your hand to play with. Don't let them grab your arm and bunny kick it, right? You don't want to encourage that kind of play, even if it's a kitten. Make sure that you're using pull toys and things that aren't attached directly to you that they can go after, or that you're throwing things. That's totally fine. But you don't want to encourage them going after you or people. Overstimulation is another big one we hear about. We see this all the time in kitties in our shelter. The best way to tell that a cat is getting overstimulated is with their tail. If their tail is swishing back and forth really quick or slapping the ground like this, they're basically saying they're getting irritated. And if you don't listen, they're either going to swipe or try to bite because you're not listening to their signals. So make sure you're always watching for overstimulation. If they are getting overstimulated, just back up, give them a break, maybe come back at a later time. Or you can use that pull toy, because if they go after the toy or the pull, that's totally fine. You just don't want them going after you. Um, the other things that happen when that tail is swishing over time, you'll see their ears go down, their pupils might get bigger, their hair might stand up. Those are all things that are telling you, oh, you need to give them a break. Um, and then just a reminder, cats, when they show you your belly, when they lay on their side and show belly, they are not like a dog. Dogs love to have their bellies rubbed. Cats, not so much. When they lay on their side like that, they're essentially telling you that they trust you. And so if you're to touch their belly in that moment, it's almost an abuse of that trust. And that's why they often attack hands. So instead, when they roll over and show you their belly, just give them a scritch on the head or on their cheeks. That's where they like it the most. Any cat that you're interacting with, always start in the head. because that's where they would interact with other cats, and that's where they're going to be the most comfortable. And then lastly, litter box issues. Of course, we don't want you to have to go through that. And I would say these come up very infrequently, but when they do, we need to know about it because we're going to first start looking for a medical cause. And then if we've exhausted all the medical causes, then we'll look at behavioral. And it could be something as small as they don't like the feel of the type of litter we've given you. So we may change litter types, we may change the size of the box, we may give you a covered versus an uncovered. All of those things can make a difference. So don't feel like you are unable to go over that hurdle because most of the time we're able to figure it out. But definitely reach out and let us know that it's happening so we can help you with it. All right, so now I'm going to go through the same thing regarding dogs, a little bit different, but some similarities too. So we are feeding our dogs twice a day. Same with cats, we feed the cats twice a day. With dogs, we are predominantly going to give you dry dog food. They tend to need the dry kibble more than the wet stuff. The wet stuff is richer and higher in fat, so not always the best option for dogs, and the dry food really keeps their teeth well taken care of. So we're going to give you dry food. We will probably give you wet as well, but we would recommend that you use it as like a mix-in to kind of make it more enticing if they're not going for the kibble. The other big thing that we'll often tell you to do is either wet down the dry kibble, because a lot of our dogs like just warm water added to the kibble just to make it easier to chew. And you can even put a little warm chicken broth on that kibble as well as an enticement. And then fresh water should always be available to these guys. We are going to try and send you with a crate, but as I stated, if it's a huge dog, sometimes we're low on big crates. But we are going to try to send you with one. So with whether you take a cat or a dog, always make sure the crate is there and available because it acts as a safe space for the animal in case they need a break. Um, Definitely get into a routine with the dog. So that means regular feeding times, regular outing times, because if you don't stick to like dogs really like that kind of structured environment. So if you don't stick to it, that's when you tend to see problems with going potty in the house. Um, Avoid invasive handling, like I was mentioning before, nail trimming, teeth brushing, any of the grooming stuff. If you notice that the dog has grooming needs, we can get that done for you. Either we can do it ourselves or we have a groomer who does things for us for free. So either way, we can have a professional do it. Just don't put yourself at risk because that's a quick way to get a nip that you're not expecting. And then, as mentioned before, if you can really try to, at least at the beginning, and try to avoid like the heavily traveled dog spaces, dog parks, beaches, and even over time, you're going to have to gauge how they do in those types of scenarios. Of course, you have plenty of control over your foster dog, but you have zero control over all the dogs out in those places, which can actually provide more of a challenge than you expect. So, definitely be cautious about where you're taking them. Okay, and then dog behavior. So the main things here that we tend to see with dogs that we're sending out, we see a lot of fear. So as I mentioned, we get a lot of animals with that less than idyllic past. And when an animal is fearful of you, the best thing you can do is basically ignore them. I know that goes against all of everything we've always thought about animals, right? We want to make them loved and feel better, and but really the best thing you can do is no eye contact, no calling them by name, no reaching, no trying to get at them. They should be starting the interaction. And sometimes it takes a while to get there. Sometimes you're just dropping treats and they're coming over and eating the treats. And then maybe you put the treats in your hand and they come over and eat the treats out of your hand. And then eventually they're eating the treats out of your hand and you might be able to touch them. It can sometimes take that long to get to that point, but it's really important that you resist that temptation to push yourself on the animal. And just read their signals. If they're running away, they don't want to be around you. If they're tucking their tail, they're super freaked out. So just make sure that you're going at their pace. And then the other big thing that we see a lot of is separation anxiety or even just general anxiety. Again, it's a lot of changes. Even though going to a great new foster home is going to help them, it's still a lot of change for them. So you want to make sure that you're providing them things that keep them busy while they're with you. That can be stuffed Kongs. We can give you lick mats. We can give you puzzles. We have all that stuff available to give to you to kind of help relieve that boredom. And one of the big things about separation anxiety is it can be exacerbated by how much effort you put into leaving and then coming back. You know how when you leave, you're like saying goodbye to everybody and giving everyone kisses. And then when you come home, they jump up and they're so excited to see you. If you can remove any of the drama from your leaving and coming home, the less you're going to deal with that separation anxiety. Because the more you amp them up, the more they're going to be like, where are you going? Where? Why? When are you coming back? They think you're never coming back. So try and keep everything very minimal. So, like if you're coming home, walk in the house. Don't even interact with the animal. Go about your business for 5 or 10 minutes. And then when they've relaxed, then you start interacting and giving them that reinforcement. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if you think so. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. And then resource guarding. So that occurs when they're either guarding their things or guarding a person. And when it's a thing, what we want to impart to you is please don't ever try to take anything out of a dog's mouth. That is also a quick way to get bit. Instead, what we do at the shelter is we do a trade. So, say they've got something that they've got in their mouth and they're growling at everybody who goes close to them. I would find something better than what they've got in their mouth. So, maybe that's like some chicken or little turkey and I put that over here. And then when they go over for that yummy treat, then I take away whatever it is they had and I don't let them have it anymore. So that's kind of how you have to manage the environment if they're guarding things. And that's really why it's super important that you don't leave your dog alone with a foster dog until you know there isn't going to be any guarding around that stuff. Um, when they're guarding a person, that can be a little bit trickier. And one thing I want to remind you of is if you take a small dog, the less you can hold them in your person, on your person, the better. The more they sit on your lap, the more you're holding them or carrying them as they walk, that actually creates you as a resource and they feel the need to protect you sometimes. So as much as you can, have them on four on the floor on a leash. That way they're not constantly on you. If they are sitting on the couch next to you and maybe they're growling at somebody who comes and sits down next to them, what I would probably do is scooch them off that couch and then ignore them for, 3 to 5 minutes. Enough of that usually gives them the idea that it's not going to be okay with you. So you essentially want to, ignore the behavior you don't want and increase the behavior that you do want to see with lots of reinforcement. And then lastly, the potty issues. The best thing you can do around that is just making sure that you are getting them on a very set feeding and potty schedule and sticking to it. If they are having accidents, what we oftentimes will do for folks is we'll give them that long line that I was talking about before. Like if you're somebody who works from home, you can attach yourself to a long line that's attached to the dog, and then they can kind of investigate the house and move around. But when you feel them pulling you, that's when you know, okay, maybe they're going to the door and I need to take them out. So if you're not sure of when they're going to be going, if they're not at all house trained, I would just err on the caution of I'm going to take you out as often as I need to make sure that you get the idea. And then when they are going outside, you want to make sure to reinforce that. Lots of treats, lots of praise, maybe toys, depends on the dog and what the dog goes for. And then if you have a marker who is lifting their leg and marking on all their territory, we have plenty of belly bands that we can send with you. The belly band just goes over their area and collects all the pee so that it does not get all over your house. And then they just easily go into the wash for another use. So we can protect you a little bit from that. Okay, that was a lot of info about
I
dogs
just
and
had
cats.
had a question about,
Yeah.
so is there like a time, like if you feed the dog, would you take them out? Because I don't have like a yard, but I would be taking the dog out for a walk to go
Yeah, yeah.
here. So is there like a time between when they eat and when you should, optimally take them
Well,
out for a little walk?
it can be a little variable by dog, but I think to start, you could just plan to do it like within 5 minutes after they're done eating.
Okay.
And just, as much as you can, like be saying like, "Hey, it's potty, let's let them sniff." If they're sniffing a lot on the ground or among something, that's a good sign. They're looking for a place to go. So you want to encourage that and like, "Good job, okay." And then again, like I said, once they do go and they're outside, you want to give them lots of praise, lots of treats, whatever it is that kind of gets them interested.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions about the dog and cat specific care before I move on? All right, you guys are doing good. You're sticking with me. I like it. Feel free to just shout out if you've got anything. Okay, so our training philosophy, we do encourage if you want to, you can work on basic training, and that can be with a cat or a dog. I know you're probably thinking cats can't be trained, but they can, and they train just like a dog does. So the type of training we do is always positive reinforcement. Like I said, you're going to want to ignore the bad behavior and give a good stimulus to increase the likelihood of the behaviors you do want. And that not only builds confidence in the animal, it can sometimes be a bridge for a really shy dog. I know that sounds odd, but if you get them doing basic behaviors, sometimes that's enough to bridge that gap and get them more comfortable with you. So if you can find a treat they really like, that might work. It builds a lot of trust in you. It strengthens the bond, teaches them what they should do, not focusing on what they should not do. And even if this is not your method, it really allows us to interact with the animal in a very consistent manner. And we're going to ask the adopters to do that too. So, please use this method if you're doing any training. All right, so let's talk just briefly about some of the medical stuff that can come up. Every animal is going to get basic vaccinations as well as flea preventative and deworming medication before they go home with you, with the exception of really young animals. If they're super young, like under 8 weeks, we're probably only going to give them deworming meds or maybe a little light flea preventative and deworming meds. But they cannot be vaccinated yet at that age, so they won't have as much to keep them safe. So the most common things that you're going to see are upper respiratory infection, diarrhea, fleas, and worms. The diarrhea, you're probably going to see that whether they are super healthy or not. It's just part of the change, and you should expect to see that for the first day to 2 days. If it gets to be 3 or 4 days and it's not going away, then we want you to bring us a sample so we can check for intestinal parasites. Um, Upper respiratory is a lot like the human cold. So if you notice they are coughing, sneezing, if they have discharge from their nose or eyes, we can help support you through that. Because it's viral, much like our own cold, we don't treat them unless it's gone to bacterial. So when it becomes bacterial, you might be dealing with things like bronchitis, or they might have infections of the eyes that's causing yellow or green goop to come out of them. That's bacterial and we can treat with antibiotics. But if it's still in the viral stage, it's just supportive care and making sure that you clear their nose so they can smell their food. Those are the two most common things. We are going to try and keep the animals on a regular flea and deworming routine. So if you have your animal for more than a month, each month we're going to be contacting you and saying, "Hey, you're due for flea meds and worming medication," and have you come and pick that stuff up. So we want to keep them on a regular regimen of preventative even while they're in your care. And if you notice any of these or anything else, you can, of course, reach out and we'll help you through it. So here are a list of some of the things that can come up that might be more of an issue that's going to need dealing with, that you want to be on the watch for. And we're going to be giving you a handbook, come tomorrow. We're going to be sending it to you. In that handbook is an emergency contact number. That's my number. So in the case of a true emergency, you can reach out to me anytime. And it not only has my number, it also has my second, who is our shelter manager, Mandy, and we can help you through any of those emergencies if they come up. But basically, this is the list of things you want to be on the lookout for. And the ones with the red veterinary emergency next to them, you're probably not going to be able to contact us in the case of those. You're probably just going to have to go directly to the vet. So things like uncontrolled bleeding or a broken limb or a trauma, like they got hit by a car or in a dog fight, you're going to have to go to the vet. And then later we can kind of chat and figure out what's going on. During the day, if something like this comes up, we use a couple of veterinary offices kind of as our contract vets. So Chanticleer Vet Hospital is just 2 doors down from us. Most often we go to them. We also use Animal Hospital of Soquel on Soquel Avenue. But after hours, and in the case of a true emergency, there is only one emergency vet in our neck of the woods. It's Santa Cruz Pacific Vet on Soquel Avenue. And if you have to bring an animal there, all you need to say is this is an SPCA foster, and they have our contact numbers. They get in contact with us. We talk about treatment decisions, and we handle, of course, all the cost of that. You may be sticking around to potentially take the animal home, or in some cases, they may tell you to go and just leave the animal with them. But they're the only place you're going to be going after hours, or if it's true one of these veterinary emergencies. Any questions about this, guys? Okay. I'm going to switch gears, going to something a little lighter than the medical stuff, which is always a little bit scary. So, we're going to talk just briefly about marketing your foster animal. Like I said, we want you to be so involved with getting us as much content as possible. And that can be photos, that can be video, that can be a bio write-up. As much as you can tell us about the animal and make it fun, really helps. I mean, if you've been on our social channels, you can probably see we often try to use humor to get people interested in our animals. Either that or we try to tug on the heartstrings. So if you can do either of those things, that definitely helps. And if you are on social media, feel free to tag us in everything that you're putting up for yourself. And we'll share it on our channels. We do want you to be open if you are to doing potential meet and greets with adopters, but it's based on your comfort level. So it could be on the phone, it could be that you drop the animal off and that we handle the show. It could be that you have them come to your home. It's just whatever you're comfortable with and what the needs of the adopter and the animal are. And then if we are having you bring them in, what we'll typically do, I'm actually not on the team that does adoption. So once we get to the adoption point, it goes through our client care team and you'll be working with them. And they usually try to get a couple of times and days and match those up for both you and the adopter, if you're bringing them in for meet and greets. Couple tips for foster photos. I know how hard this is. Animals are constantly moving and it can be really hard to get a good photo. But as you can see on the photos on this slide, obviously the top one is probably the best because it is completely focused and right in on the animal with a very vague and fuzzy background. If you can choose one color behind the animal, all the better, especially something like white. But yeah, we want it to be in focus, free of distraction. If you want to use filters, that's okay. And then just make sure you crop out as much of the useless space around the animal as you can and really try to get focused in on their face and their body. If you can get them showing off their personality in some way, even better. And we love pictures of you with your foster, so don't be afraid to throw yourself in there. That's always a huge plus and gets people interested. One thing that you can use if you're trying to get photos of your animal, have lots of squeaky toys or something that makes noise, and have treats in the other hand, right? So you always kind of go with both so that you can get their attention as needed. And please don't send us any photos with the animal looking away or to the side or really upset with you because we're not going to be able to use those ones. Okay. So as I mentioned, we are using social media. We use Facebook, we use Instagram, we use YouTube, do some TikTok. If you're using any of those, make sure to tag us and keep us in the loop. Use humor whenever possible. If you are doing posts about your animal, try and pick a different subject each day to get interest up about them. And then invite everyone you know to share as much as possible. If you can boost their signal, that really helps. And if you can add on hashtags, that helps it get seen a lot more as well. Now, let's talk about returning your foster animal. Always a tough one, especially if it's your first foster. Everything that you're going to do with us, picking up an animal, bringing them back, coming for supplies, all of those things need to be scheduled with a day and time because we use a staff calendar and I may not be the one helping you. So it needs to be on a calendar where everyone can kind of see what's going on. When you come back, we'll schedule it, and you want to bring anything that you haven't used because we will then use it with other fosters. If you send us write-ups and photos after the fact, that's okay. Typically, they're going to be with us for anywhere from 3 to 7 days. So if you get them to us like the next day, we can still use them. And then you're welcome to check in as often as you'd like and just find out how they're doing. If you yourself or someone you know is interested in any animal that you're fostering, you need to let us know because once that happens, I am basically given the time frame. I have to have your stuff into the client care team by 48 hours. So you need to put in an application or the person needs to put in an application. Otherwise, they're going to move on to the next person. We are fielding applications for interest like all the time, and I'm not privy to that information. So definitely keep me in the loop if you've got interest yourself or somebody else interested. Okay, a few frequently asked questions, and then I'll open it up to you guys in case you have any questions. So, how long will you need to care for your foster animal? This definitely varies, and once you start taking fosters, it's really up to you, and we can chat about what's available. It starts at a slumber party and can go from there. In fact, we have a slumber party that just went out, and we have an animal who's been out for like over a year. So it really varies. Can you take your foster animal outside or away from home? Yes, of course you can, but definitely wait until you get to know them better and know how they react in settings where there might be a lot of people, dogs, other things that can be a stressor. We do ask that you stay in county. Don't take them out of county. If they get away from you, it's going to be impossible for us to get them back. So if you're going out of town, either bring them back to us or we can talk about options for someone to come in and care for them while you're out. Help, I've lost my foster animal. What do I do? Please let us know as soon as this happens. As I mentioned, we will go out there and try and find them with you, like we just did with the dog who got away. And we definitely let everybody know. So we put it on our social channels. We let Santa Cruz County Animal Shelter know. We'll put up signs, whatever we need to do in order to get the animal back. But we just need to know that it's happened. So keep us in the loop. And then for foster animal, that bites you or someone else that you know, we are required by the state to report any bite that breaks the skin. So please let us know if this occurs, and we will do all the work on getting the information from the person who was bitten. All we need is a name and a phone number. So if it happens to be somebody you don't know, if you can get their name and phone number and just say, hey, the shelter is going to be in contact with you, that's enough. And we'll handle all of that. What if you can't complete your foster care commitment? Like I said, if you are aware of times coming up when you're going to be out of town, just let me know going in so I know to expect that and I can try and get something, someone else to take them. And if something comes up you weren't expecting, you can always bring the animal back. That life happens. So that's certainly okay. And if we have to find them another foster, we will. And then lastly, can you adopt one of your foster animals at the end of a foster period? Of course you can. I know people always say this is a foster fail. I don't feel like it's a foster fail. I feel like it's a foster success. But I will say that I would ask that you don't do this right off the bat because then I lose you as a foster, which is a bummer. So if you can hold off on like, falling in love with the first one you have, and I know that's a lot to ask. But if you can stick with us for a bit and be a regular foster, we'd super appreciate it. And again, if you do know that you are interested or someone else you know is interested, please let us know right away. Get in that application within 48 hours, and then the client care team can move on with you. Okay. Next steps. So after today, I'm going to send you our foster manual. We're going to send along with that some short little behavior videos you can watch about things that you might experience with foster animals, and then further tips for marketing your animal to read at your leisure. I'm going to move you from applicant to active in our volunteer database. So you're going to start getting my emails. And foster pleas, they tend to be every week or every other week. And then you also will be getting my Friday update. That's every week. And that tells you who's new at the shelter, who's out in foster. It tells you what our upcoming events are, what our needs are, all that kind of stuff. So you'll get regular emails from us. Um, you will start receiving those foster emails when we need fosters, and make sure that you don't, if once you say you don't want to receive email from us, we have lost you as a foster. I have to basically remove you from the list. So don't opt out of email. It's the only option I've got right now for communicating these things to you. So make sure you keep yourself active on it. And just know that it can take some time before you actually get a foster animal. So be patient, reach out. If you want to do a slumber party to get yourself started, that's certainly an option. And any time you come to meet a foster or take a foster or pick up any supplies, remember that we're going to be making you appointments. Here's my email. You can also email my coworker, Jennifer at spcasc.org, or volunteer at spcasc.org. Um, you'll get all this info, by the way. And then when you do have a foster animal, just one last little tidbit, you are going to get some contacts, not just from myself or from Jennifer. You're going to get an email check-in from something called Maddie's Pet Assistant. It might even go into your junk mail. This can be helpful if it asks you questions about the foster and then gives you information on what to do about things. So be open to receiving this Maddie's Pet Assistant because it can be really helpful. And then when you fill it out, it actually comes to me. So I also can see if there's any issues coming up. And oftentimes I will use that to reach out to the person and say, hey, I see that this is going on. What can we do? How can we fix that? You're also potentially going to be getting check-ins with our two foster mentors. We have Lily, who mentors our cat fosters, and Val, who mentors our dog fosters. And they typically call people on the phone or try to email you, and they're asking you things like, how's the animal doing? Do you need supplies? Can you send us photos? All that kind of stuff. So don't be surprised if they reach out besides us. And just remember that we're going to schedule everything that you need to have done is going to be scheduled with a day and time just to make sure that you get the help you need and aren't left waiting. Okay, questions. That was a lot of information, I know. Most of it will be covered in your foster handbook. And of course, if you have additional questions, you can ask them now or you can email us. But we will probably start sending you all that stuff tomorrow. Any
I have a
questions, you guys?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, if with the foster kittens, when they turn 2 pounds or whatever, when they
Yeah.
get fixed, is that the time that you guys take them back immediately, or do you leave them in the foster home until they find placements? How do you guys place those?
A lot of times they are coming back because they'll have to come back for spay neuter surgery, but it really varies based on our population that we've got and the needs of the animals. Sometimes animals are not a quick turnaround for spay neuter, and so we might ask the foster to be willing to take them back for a short time afterward. But most of the time, our aim is to get them in, get them fixed, and get them up for adoption.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately I can't stay on any longer. I have a meeting I have to go to. I don't have any questions, and
Okay.
I'm looking forward to all the documentation we're going to get.
Okay. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for all the info.
Yeah. Any
Bye.
other? Yeah. Bye. Any other question?
I'm a volunteer at Great Bear, so it's easy for me to just go
Oh,
across. Have
yeah,
any
you're
questions?
right across the way. Awesome. Well,
Okay.
well, thanks for joining us, Claudia.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, last chance. Anybody got questions? Now's your chance. We love questions. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, then I just want to thank you guys for sitting with me through all this. Give yourselves a round of applause. You made it. You're now a foster. There are going to be probably questions along the way, so don't hesitate to reach out. If you're not getting a foster animal or you're not sure what to do, Jennifer and I are here to support you. And thanks for being willing to open your homes to our animals. And we look forward to working with you guys. I hope you all have a fantastic evening.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Brenna.
Yeah. Bye, you guys. Thank you. Hey, you made it.
Yeah.
You're still up.
Yeah, I
You
know.
did it.
I'm like,
Yay.
"Wow." We got
Oh,
that recorded, so that's good.
yes. Now I need to